Lexie Hull didn't hold back. Her interview stripped away the facade surrounding DeWanna Bonner's sudden departure from the Indiana Fever, and what she revealed sent shockwaves through the league. Hull described not just an exit, but an orchestrated betrayal. A veteran who vanished without warning, shattering the trust she had once inspired in a young team relying on her leadership.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Bonner, once heralded as a crucial mentor to rising stars like Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, had quietly aligned herself with Phoenix Mercury in a behind-the-scenes recruitment plot that left her former teammates blindsided and disillusioned. What appeared to be a mid-season transfer was, in Hull's words, a calculated move that exposed deeper dysfunction and tampering within the league. This wasn't just about one player leaving. It was a gut punch to a team already under pressure. But rather than fold, the Fever responded with unity. The betrayal, while painful, became a rallying point. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston stepped forward, leading team meetings and reshaping the locker room dynamic in Bonner's absence. Hull's willingness to speak out didn't just expose unethical recruitment. It validated the Fever's resilience. The team turned a personal loss into a collective wake-up call, strengthening bonds, sharpening focus, and forging a culture rooted in trust and transparency. Lexie Hull just dropped a bombshell, and DeWanna Bonner is squarely in the blast radius. In a new interview, Hull pulls no punches. What seemed like a routine veteran departure is now being framed as a calculated betrayal that left the Indiana Fever shaken, confused, and, honestly, furious. Bonner's mid-season exit wasn't just sudden. According to Hull, it was cold, secretive, and left the entire team blindsided. For months, DeWanna Bonner had been positioned as a leader, a seasoned vet, a two-time champion who was supposed to bring poise and guidance to a young roster led by stars like Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and of course, Lexie Hull herself. And let's be real, on paper, she made sense. The Fever needed experience, someone who could help mentor a team on the rise. Instead, what they got was silence, abandonment, and a backstage plot worthy of a sports drama docuseries. Hull's interview pulls back the curtain on what really went down, and it's not pretty. She makes it clear, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Bonner had been plotting her exit with the Phoenix Mercury long before the season hit its midpoint. And not just plotting, allegedly participating in a coordinated tampering scheme designed to lure her away from Indiana, while the Fever were still counting on her leadership. According to Hull, the signs were there, but no one wanted to see them. The growing aloofness, the sudden lack of communication, the way Bonner seemed checked out during key team meetings. But even with those red flags, the actual moment of departure felt like a gut punch. One day she was there, the next she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, no sense of responsibility. Just vanished. And here's where things get messy. Hull claims that the Phoenix Mercury had been actively working behind the scenes to recruit Bonner long before any official moves were made. We're talking tampering, covert conversations, hidden agendas. It wasn't just about Bonner making a personal decision. It was about one franchise undermining another in the middle of a rebuild. For the Fever, it felt like sabotage. They weren't just losing a player. They were losing a voice in the locker room, a mentor, someone who, up until that point, had been trusted to help guide the team through a transformative season. Hull describes the mood after Bonner's exit as fractured. Players were confused, hurt, and worst of all, left wondering if the trust they had placed in their so-called veteran leader had ever been real. And when you think about it, the damage wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. The Fever were building something. They were creating a new culture around rising stars like Clark and Boston. Bonner's exit didn't just leave a gap in experience. It disrupted team chemistry at a crucial point in the season. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because instead of spiraling, the Fever regrouped. According to Hull, Bonner's betrayal became a rallying cry. The younger players stepped up fast. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston didn't just fill the leadership vacuum. They transformed it. They became the voices in the huddle, the ones calling out plays, organizing team check-ins, and leading by example. Hull describes it as a shift, one that brought the team even closer. The betrayal, instead of breaking the fever, actually strengthened them. That's the irony. Bonner's departure, which would have derailed the season, ended up solidifying the team's resolve. Hull says the locker room became more focused, more transparent, and more united. Without the shadow of a disengaged veteran looming over them, the younger core found their voice and started winning. But don't mistake growth for forgiveness. Hull makes it clear what happened still stings. Not just because Bonner left, but because of how she did it. The silence, the secrecy, the manipulation behind the scenes. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was disrespectful. And when Hull talks about it now, there's a tone of disappointment that cuts deep. Then there's the bigger issue, the Mercury's role in all this. Hull's claims point to something much larger than one player's bad decision. It exposes a league-wide problem. If a franchise can just swoop in, manipulate behind closed doors, and poach a player mid-season, what does that say about integrity in the WNBA? Hull calls it what it is, tampering. And she's not wrong. The implications are huge. If teams are allowed to pull stunts like this without consequences, it sets a dangerous precedent. It turns player development into a chessboard where loyalty and growth mean nothing compared to backdoor deals and premeditated trades. And it sends a clear message to young players. Trust no one. That's why Hull speaking out matters. She didn't just give an interview. She lit a fire. By telling the truth, she's forcing a conversation the league clearly needs to have about professionalism, about transparency, about what leadership actually means. And here's the thing, Hull could have stayed quiet. It would have been easier to move on, let the team's performance speak for itself. But instead, she chose to speak up, not out of spite, but out of principle. Because what happened wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a violation of team values. According to her, the Fever have taken that hard lesson and used it as fuel. Practices got sharper. The energy changed. Without Bonner, the remaining players lean on each other in ways they hadn't before. There was no longer any doubt about who was in it for the long haul. And while the Mercury might have won the short-term grab, the long-term story is still being written. Hull says the team's championship goals are alive and well, maybe even stronger than before. With Clark, Boston, Hull, and Mitchell leading the charge, Indiana's young core is laser-focused on proving that resilience beats reputation every time. They've already started making noise. The chemistry is real. The momentum is building. And more importantly, the culture is shifting away from superficial leadership and towards something deeper, something earned. Hull says the Fever now know what to look for in a leader and what to avoid. So yes, Bonner's departure caused chaos, but it also exposed cracks that needed to be sealed. It forced the Fever to grow up fast, reevaluate what kind of team they wanted to be, and step fully into their power. Hull's message is clear. Leadership isn't about rings or resume. It's about showing up, communicating, staying accountable even when things get hard. And that's a lesson the Fever learned the hard way, but one they won't forget. So what happens now? The Fever move forward, stronger, smarter, and more connected than before. And if Bonner thought her exit would quietly fade into the background, well, Lexie Hull just made sure that won't happen. If you've been following the Indiana Fever drama, this is your moment to sound off. What do you think about Hull's revelations? Was this just business or betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if you're here for the honesty, and subscribe for more real talk on the wild side of sports. This saga isn't over, and you'll want to be here for the next chapter. Here's the part that really gets under your skin. DeWanna Bonner wasn't just a random trade piece. She was a veteran, the one who was supposed to teach, guide, mentor. You bring in someone with championship DNA for a reason, right? To show the young guns how it's done. And for a while, that's exactly how it looked. A locker room full of promise, a couple of rough games, but still, they had the tools. Bonner was supposed to be the bridge from raw talent to real contenders. But now we know that bridge was already burning. Lexie Hull's account changes the whole narrative. Because according to her, the signs were all there, and they were hard to miss once you looked closely. Bonner was becoming more and more distant, less involved in huddles, less vocal, less present. And then she was gone. Mid-season. No warning. Just packed up and left like it was the most natural thing in the world. And what makes this worse isn't just the how, it's the who. DeWanna Bonner isn't some bench warmer with nothing to lose. She's a big name, a player other athletes look up to. When she bails mid-season without explanation, it doesn't just throw off the roster. It shakes the entire foundation of what a leader is supposed to be. Hull didn't mince words. It felt like betrayal. Full stop. She described the mood as stunned. Not angry at first, just confused. Players trying to process what had just happened. Was there an injury? A family emergency? A falling out behind closed doors? None of the above. Bonner left because another team whispered in her ear, and she listened. Let's talk about that. Because Hull's claims about the Phoenix Mercury, that's not just tea, that's a full-on kettle spill. The way she tells it. Phoenix had been orchestrating Bonner's exit from the beginning. Quiet conversations. Long-term planning. A recruitment campaign that started well before anyone in Indiana had a clue. And no, this isn't just messy. It's illegal under WNBA rules. Tampering, plain and simple. And yet it happened anyway. Which begs the question, where's the accountability? Hull's frustration comes through loud and clear. Not just at Bonner, but at the system that allowed it to happen. If a team can just swoop in and poach a player in the middle of a rebuild, what's stopping it from happening again? This isn't just about one player. It's about the league, the culture, and the standards that teams are held to. Hull puts it bluntly. This kind of manipulation ruins trust, destroys team chemistry, and undermines everything the WNBA is trying to build. And you know what? She's right. The Fever were building something real. They had a young, exciting core. Caitlin Clark was drawing eyes. Aaliyah Boston was dominating in the paint. Lexie Hull was grinding. Everything was moving in the right direction. Until suddenly it wasn't. It takes guts to tell this kind of story. Most players wouldn't. Most players would let the narrative fade away, move on, focus on the game. But Hull knew what was at stake. If no one talks about this kind of behavior, it becomes normal. And if it becomes normal, it keeps happening. She's drawing a line in the sand. Bonner leaving might have looked like a business decision on the outside, but internally, it was personal. It left players questioning not just her intentions, but their own sense of judgment. How do you trust again after someone who's supposed to lead you just disappears? Hull said the hardest part wasn't losing the veteran talent. It was realizing they'd placed their faith in someone who didn't really have their back. That hits different. And yet, here's where the story flips from chaos to comeback. Because the Fever didn't stay down. In fact, they got louder, sharper, tougher. Hull talked about the transformation like it was a spark. The moment Bonner walked out, the rest of the team stepped up. Leaders emerged, real ones. Not just vocal, but active, accountable, transparent. Caitlin Clark, who was already under a microscope from the moment she joined the league, became a force. Aaliyah Boston, who's always been poised, started owning the room. And Lexie Hull, she turned the pain into purpose. The practices changed. So did the energy. No more walking on eggshells, no more vague tension. The vibes got clearer, tighter, more honest, without someone half in, half out messing with the chemistry. The team found its rhythm, and the results started to show. You can't fake unity. You can't fake belief. And Hull says that's what kept them going. Even when the headlines were messy and the locker room still had scars, they focused on each other. Not the drama, not the betrayal, just each other. There's something powerful about that. Turning a loss into a lesson, a mess into motivation. Hull's words made it clear. They're not just playing for wins anymore. They're playing for each other. Still, the wound is real. Hull admitted the betrayal still lingers. Not because they need Bonner. They don't. But because it's a reminder that not everyone in the league plays by the same rules. Some will smile at you, then ghost you when it suits their agenda. That kind of betrayal doesn't just vanish. But Hull isn't asking for pity. She's asking for awareness. For people to understand what goes on behind the box scores. For the league to take tampering seriously. For fans to recognize the difference between leadership and lip service. And most of all, for young teams like the Fever to be protected from this kind of manipulation. If you've been following this saga from the outside, you probably saw a headline, maybe a tweet, and thought, oh, Bonner left? That's sports. But from the inside, it was deeper than that. It was about integrity, about growth, about having the courage to call out what's wrong, even when it comes from someone with rings. Hull's voice cuts through the noise because it comes from experience. She lived this. Watch the team nearly splinter. Watch teammates question themselves. And then help rebuild from the ground up. Her message isn't just about holding Bonner accountable. It's about setting a new standard. Professional sports aren't just about stats. They're about relationships, trust, communication. And if you can't show up for your team in those areas, no amount of experience makes you a leader. Hull's interview ends on a note of determination. The Fever are locked in. They're building something different now, something more honest. No more relying on names. No more putting faith in empty titles. Just real players, real effort, and real leadership. So when you see them next season, don't just look at the scoreboard. Look at the chemistry, the energy, the way they move as a unit. That's what came out of this mess. A team that knows exactly who they are and who they're not. They might not have Bonner anymore, but they've got something better. Caitlin Clark stepping into her voice. Aaliyah Boston commanding the paint. Lexie Hull holding it all down. Kelsey Mitchell firing on all cylinders. The pieces are there. And now, the foundation is stronger than ever. This is how you respond to betrayal. Not with revenge, but with resilience. And look, if you're still sitting there thinking, maybe this wasn't that deep, let's be clear. Lexie Hull didn't go public because of some personal vendetta. She didn't drag this out to stir drama for clicks or attention. She spoke because the silence was hurting the team more than the betrayal itself. Let's not forget, this was a rookie-heavy roster navigating the biggest season of their careers. All eyes on Caitlin Clark. National media attention on Indiana for the first time in years. Pressure building every single game. They didn't need perfection. They needed guidance. Real guidance. Someone who'd been there, felt the weight of expectations, and could walk them through the chaos. Instead, what they got was a disappearing act. Hull's honesty shines a harsh light on just how damaging that can be. When someone with Bonner status chooses self-interest over solidarity, it doesn't just reflect on her, it affects everyone. Suddenly, roles have to shift. Players have to scramble. Chemistry has to be rebuilt on the fly. And all of it could have been avoided if Bonner had just communicated. If she'd been honest. But nope, not a heads up. Not a closed-door talk. Just gone. That's what stings the most. It's not that Bonner left. It's how she left. And it's who she left behind. You can hear the frustration in Hull's voice when she talks about it. The hurt, sure, but mostly the disbelief. The kind of disbelief that comes when someone you looked up to turns out to be the opposite of what they claim to be. And yeah, it's hard not to feel for her. For all of them. Because what they experienced wasn't just a leadership failure. It was a wake-up call. A lesson in what loyalty really means. Not the performative kind. Not the kind that shows up for media day and vanishes by mid-season. The real kind. The messy, everyday kind that means being there. Showing up. Communicating when things are hard. Investing in the people around you even when it doesn't benefit your brand. And Hull's takeaway is crystal clear. Leadership without accountability is worthless. That's the core of this whole saga. That's what separates the players who build teams from the ones who just pass through them. The Fever didn't need Bonner to be perfect. They just needed her to care, to show some transparency, to acknowledge that walking away from a team of young athletes halfway through a season has consequences. But she didn't. And now, the ripple effect is obvious. Hull describes a shift in the locker room after Bonner's exit as both sobering and strangely empowering. It forced the younger players to reevaluate what kind of culture they wanted, what kind of standards they were going to hold themselves and each other to. They realized something important. You don't need a decorated vet to have leadership. You need buy-in. You need presence, vulnerability, commitment. You need players who aren't just clocking in for the paycheck or the headlines, but who are locked in day-to-day, through the grind, who show up when the lights aren't on. And that's what Lexie, Caitlin, Aaliyah, and the rest of this Indiana core are now embodying. That's what the post-Bonner fever are about. They turn the betrayal into a blueprint, a reverse example of what not to be. A warning sign they're not going to ignore next time someone comes in with shiny resume and sweet promises. You want to be part of this team? Earn it, not with titles, with trust. And speaking of trust, Hull's decision to speak out wasn't without risk. Let's be honest, players don't usually break this kind of code, especially not in women's sports, where speaking up can quickly be labeled as being difficult or divisive. The fact that she laid it all out like this, it took guts, but it also did something important. It validated what the rest of the Fever roster had been feeling, but maybe didn't have the words to express. It gave voice to the confusion, the hurt, and the quiet disappointment that had been simmering under the surface. And sometimes, all a team needs is for someone to say it out loud. That's what Hull did. She turned confusion into clarity. She made it okay to admit they were hurt, that they felt betrayed, that what happened wasn't normal, and shouldn't be treated like business as usual. Because guess what? That just business mindset is exactly how teams lose their soul. And the Fever? They're not interested in losing theirs. Hull makes it clear that the team's now operating with a totally different kind of energy. Not just motivated to win, but to win the right way, with integrity, with real leadership, with players who lift each other up and stick around when things get hard. That culture shift, it's already paying off. You can feel it on the court. There's more communication, more chemistry, less ego. Everyone's locked in and no one's coasting. It's not about one star anymore. It's about all of them. Clark may be the face, Boston may be the anchor, but it's the collective that makes the Fever dangerous now. And Bonner's absence, painful as it was, helped them realize that. So if the Phoenix Mercury thought they pulled off some quiet heist behind the scenes, they might want to check again, because what they really did was give Indiana the best lesson in unity they could have asked for. They tried to divide them. Instead, they galvanized them. Hull didn't just spill tea. She set a standard. She reminded everyone watching that this league isn't just about talent. It's about trust. And if the WNBA wants to grow, if it wants real longevity and loyalty, it has to start holding players and teams to that standard. Because the truth is, this isn't just one story. It's a snapshot of what's happening in locker rooms across the league. The politics, the pressure, the poaching. It's real. And the only way it changes is when players like Lexie Hull decide they're done staying quiet. She didn't have to say anything, but she did. And now, the Fever moved forward with clarity, purpose, and, most importantly, each other. So keep your eye on this team, because the narrative has changed. It's no longer about what they lost. It's about what they found. A locker room that knows exactly who it is. A culture built on accountability. A group of women who aren't afraid to call out the dysfunction and rise anyway. And that, honestly, is way more dangerous than any veteran trade deal. If you've stuck with us through this roller coaster, drop a comment below. What's your take? Was Bonner wrong for the way she left? Should the league crack down harder on tampering? We want to hear from you. Like, if you respect players who speak their truth, share if you think this kind of leadership deserves more attention. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time the sports world flips itself upside down. Because around here, we stay ready.